What's your name?
Oh, should I say my last name or no?
You can say.
Okay. Sorry. Hi, my name is Frances Gyoda.
Gyoda.
Yes, Gyoda.
And where are you from?
So I'm originally from Japan. I was born in Japan, but I grew up in the U.S., St. Louis, most of my life.
St. Louis.
Yeah, St. Louis.
How long have you been in Japan?
I moved here 3 years ago.
You grew up in St. Louis?
Yeah, I grew up in St. Louis all my life. So my dad was in the military, so that's why we originally had to move back to the U.S., and then I just stayed there all my life.
So you're half Japanese?
Yeah, so my mom's Japanese, and then my dad is white American, but I look white, so.
How is it like to grow up in St. Louis as a half Japanese person?
Honestly, there's not a lot of Japanese people in St. Louis in general. There's a lot of Chinese people, so, and like physically I look really white, so I didn't really feel different just because like it was kind of easy growing up. Definitely when I was a kid I struggled with like being Asian, just, like you get teased about it, but it wasn't, yeah, I had a good life in America, even though I'm half Japanese, yeah. I didn't feel different or anything.
And what was the reason for you to come to Japan, move to Japan?
So originally I moved to Japan because I wanted to learn how to speak Japanese better. And my grandparents live out here, so I just wanted to be closer with them. But also being half Japanese, since I grew up in the US, how do I say it? Like I wanted to tap into my Japanese culture more. Like I grew up with American culture all my life, and with my mom like showing us Japanese things like Japanese food or Japanese language once in a while, but I just kind of wanted to see what it's like to live out here myself. So that's why I moved out here.
Where do you live in Japan?
So right now I go back and forth to a lot of places, but currently I live in Yokosuka, but I go back to Hokkaido and Nagano. So I'm just bouncing around right now with my grandparents.
How did your lifestyle become that way?
So I have Japanese grandparents that live in Yokosuka, but they both unfortunately have cancer. So I have kind of become a caretaker for them. So I help take care of them, I cook for them, I clean for them, and I take them to their doctor's appointments. So the reason why I've had to bounce around with them is because whenever they need me, I just go to wherever they are and I just help them out. So that's kind of how it became to be. There's not a lot of people my age that are taking care of their grandparents.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I can't really relate to other people my age completely currently, but.
So you're American. You don't speak Japanese as a native speaker,
No.
even though you do understand Japanese.
Yeah.
What's the hardship when it comes to just taking care of your Japanese grandparents in Japan?
The hardest thing I've realized is actually going to the hospital with them. I have no idea what they're saying, like medical terms, things like that. I've had time where I had to call the ambulance to our house because my grandfather thought he was like having a heart attack, and I did not know how to explain to like the doctors like what was going on. So things like that is probably the hardest thing about taking care of my grandparents as an American. I can understand basic Japanese, but medical things are really hard for me to understand. So that's probably the hardest thing I go through. Yeah.
And how have you been liking living in Japan so far?
I love it. I'm not gonna lie, it's hard though. There's definitely hard parts about living in Japan. But yeah, I really enjoy it. The safety is the number one thing I've noticed. I mean, St. Louis is not safe. I don't know if
I bet, yeah.
Have you been?
Yeah. I've never been to States, but
yeah,
I've heard of it.
It's definitely not the safest place. So compared to St. Louis, it's pretty safe. And it's really, the food is great out here, safety, and but culturally, there have been things that I've clashed with, like work culture in Japan. I can't get used to it. Like overtime, you guys like are so strict in work culture.
Have you worked in a Japanese company or have you worked in Japan?
So I worked in Japan. I worked as an English teacher for like a company. So although a lot of my coworkers were foreigners, all the managers and like people up, like my bosses, were all Japanese. So it was a Japanese company, and they had Japanese rules. So yeah, I worked for them, and it didn't really mesh well. Like, I'm sure a lot of other foreigners that live in Japan go through this, but there's kind of like this stereotype that foreigners are lazy. So when you enter a Japanese company, you can kind of feel that they think that way about you automatically. So I struggled with that. And then, yeah, just the biggest thing I struggled with is in Japan, like they don't have a separation between like work life and personal life. Like they just merge it all together. So it was like the biggest thing that I struggled with working in a Japanese company.
Do you have any moments where you thought, oh, there's no separation between private and work?
Like, I just think like the way that they would talk to you and say, hey, like you need to work overtime. The thing about Japanese people in Japanese workplaces is they don't tell you. They just expect you to know and expect you to do it. So if I didn't know that we were supposed to work overtime, you can tell that they kind of look at you like, why are you clocking out? So then you're like, oh, okay, I need to stay longer. It's not something direct. It's something indirect over time that I feel like I've noticed that,
Any like specific comments you got and you remember?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. Like I remember one time, one of my coworkers told me like, you don't do your work enough. So then I asked him straight up in English. I said, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And he didn't respond. So like, I guess, yeah, it's just like they wanted me to stay later, but I finished all my work. So I felt like, why am I staying later for work that I already finished? And I think it's really common because I hear from other people too that work in Japanese companies is they stay overtime for work that they could finish in less than 8 hours. So yeah, I think that was the only comment that was told directly to me, but everything was indirect. Like I heard it from other people, like managers that would tell other managers, and then I heard it from them.
What has been the biggest culture shock for you in Japan?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I think making friends or like the way that people talk to each other has been like the biggest culture shock. So growing up, my mom did speak to me in Japanese, but I didn't fully understand the whole keigo like aspect or like senpai kohai aspect. It's like a whole different world in Japan. So like, let's say I hang out with people, they're not my close friends, but we're not coworkers, we're just friendly towards each other. Everyone still speaks keigo, and like, it's still, it's kind of, I don't know how to say it. It's just like the air is not completely comfortable. Like everyone is still like polite and like no one feels relaxed is what I've noticed. When I make friends in America, it's so easy just to talk to strangers and just like really hit it off. But in Japan, it takes a long time for you to get to that point. So I just think culturally, making friends in Japan is a whole nother ball game. And you have to like schedule months and months in advance to hang out with someone.
You're a married person.
Yes, I'm married, yeah.
Are you married? Who are you married to?
A Japanese.
All right. How is it like to be married to a Japanese person?
It's great. So I got lucky because although he's Japanese, he's very familiar with American culture, but there are some cultural differences that we go through that are like kind of hard. Just with like, he speaks English too, but there are some times where language barrier and cultural barriers, there's issues with that. But yeah, it's been good so far. And I'm half Japanese, so I think it's a little bit easier for me than like someone that's completely American.
Before marriage, how was it like dating a Japanese person?
So before I got married, I had horrible experience with Japanese guys. Like being cheated on, like, this is not all Japanese men, but like a lot of Japanese men are very closed off with their feelings. Like they're not really honest with how they feel, is my experience. So before I got married, like the Japanese people that I were dating, yeah, they just, there's like, how do I say? There's like a kyabakura, hostess culture, like nomikai too, drinking after work kind of culture, and which is sometimes bad for relationships because men think that they can go off and cheat. So yeah, I've had issues like that with Japanese men. The first time I got cheated on was actually from a Japanese guy, but it was kind of complicated. So we were doing long distance at the time because of COVID. COVID happened. And I actually had found out, not from him, but from our mutual friend, that like he went to like a prostitute and like had sex with someone. And yeah, it was crazy because our mutual friend had told me. And yeah, and then of course, like, I don't know, I think it's a common thing that I've noticed men do. Like, they'll never apologize to you, but like afterwards they'll try to contact you and say like, oh, how are you doing? Like, みたいな感じ. But anyways, Japanese men, yeah, you just gotta find a good one. But not all men are the same, but that was just my
Is
experience.
it a cheating to go to person?
Hell yeah! It's cheating to go to a prostitute. もうそれも that's the one thing about Japanese men is that like kyabakuras are like hostess clubs or like nomikais. When you guys do stuff afterwards, whether it's cheating or not, it's kind of you guys argue like, is it considered cheating? Is it cheating? I think if you're having sex or you're kissing or you're doing anything at a kyabakura, host club or anything, that's cheating. Period. So, yeah.